All right, so let's start with that first series of closed doors meetings this week at City Council, essentially. Nolan, what are the factors here that they're taking into consideration?
Well, I mean, they can vote as early as Saturday to get rid of Kevyn Orr. That's when his 18-month contract expires, and under the law, City Council can send him packing. Now, the question is that a good idea this close to bankruptcy? I think anybody would agree you don't want to make that switch now with bankruptcy almost wrapped up. You should keep your team in place. But, you know, politics come into play. There's a lot of pressure on these guys to return the city to elected leadership, to democracy, if you will. And it's a hard vote for them to take, but I don't think they have any choice but to do it.
What's the balance here, Stephen, of that want and need to bring the city back to their elected leadership, but knowing that the bankruptcy process is so intricate, and Kevyn Orr is really one of the premier bankruptcy attorneys in the country?
Right. Well, you can't. There's no practical way to take him out of the process at this point because we're not through. But there is. I think council members are hearing a lot from people in the city about, you know, the importance of, even if you support the bankruptcy and even if you support the idea that we needed an emergency manager, I think a lot of people feel like, look, it's time to let the elected officials take back over. And I think what they're working out is a way for that to happen in large measure, but that Kevyn Orr stays on in some capacity to manage the bankruptcy, and there are some things that he's got to do with the plan of adjustment too, as I understand it, so that doesn't get screwed up, the implementation of that. And so you're talking about some sort of political compromise that gives everybody enough cover so that nobody pays a price for this down the road, but that the right thing gets done for the city.
And they got to be careful how much they tie his hands on. And what they risk here is sometime between now and Saturday, the governor stepping in if he thinks it's going to go in the wrong direction, because his contention has always been he could reappoint Kevyn Orr before the vote.
I don't think he can reappoint Kevyn. I think he
can reappoint
choose a new emergency manager, and that's not any better.
Outcome.
You need Kevyn to manage what he started, to finish what he started.
Okay, so there's been 3 days of closed-door meetings. So are essentially they looking at some kind of way to, I guess, extend or create a new position, or what's the legal, I guess, the legal possibilities here?
I think that's what they're working out. I mean, essentially the city would have to hire Kevyn Orr, I think, and keep him on as you know, somebody who's managing the bankruptcy and at least the initial stages of the implementation of the plan of adjustment. But I think there'll be real questions about who should pay for that. Should it be Detroit, who is still broke, or should it be the state?
Well, the city's paying for everything now. I mean,
right.
The state's not going to pay for anything in this. The question is, well, how much power are they willing to give him? They could make him a special bankruptcy master, if you will, but they've got to instill enough power in that position to give him the leverage at the table to do what he needs to do. I mean, he can't be an appointee who's jerked around by the council, who's at the mercy of the mayor. He's got to maintain the level of authority and control he has now, or he loses his leverage at the table.
But he would eventually have to report. He would have to report to Mayor Dugan, though, if
they
report
do
to
somebody, right? And it's not going to be state officials anymore. I don't think that can be worked out. And you're right. You have to give him enough leeway to manage what he's here to manage, which, of course, the mayor and the council are not in any position to do that stuff. So, I think everybody recognizes that. I mean, I think it's a sign of how far we've progressed in terms of elected representation in the city, that I don't think you're hearing a lot of craziness coming from the council about throwing Kevyn, you know, or completely out of the city. I mean, I think everyone's got a practical approach to this, and trying to, you know, cover themselves, though, politically.
I was just going to say, but what are the political ramifications if you're that city council member that emerges from 3 or 4 days of closed-door meetings and then says, yes, I'm voting to keep Kevyn Orr on? How does that come back around in 4 years?
Well, it's 3 years now, actually, but still.
No, you're right.
You know, still, I think what's going to matter in 3 years is not whether they kept Kevyn Orr on for a few more weeks or not. It's how much progress they made after the bankruptcy in leading Detroit to a livable city, to fixing the things that are wrong. That's what's going to matter here. If they give Kevyn Orr another month on the job or postpone this vote for 6 weeks or what have you, and 3 years from now, this is a functioning city, nobody's going to worry
think that's
about that.
But if 3 years from now that there's serious problems and a lot of the things haven't happened the way they said they were going to happen, this could come back.
Absolutely, and that's sort of the catch-22. If you get rid of him, you're almost guaranteeing that none of the things that could happen after the bankruptcy would happen, because the whole thing would likely collapse. And he needs more than a month or 6 weeks. We won't be done with the trial, I don't think, until late October, early November. Then the judge has got to make his decision. Right, unless you get the last couple of creditors to
get that last
go
creditor
along.
on board that can wrap up in a few weeks here.
I think we're talking about end of the year, though, before the city's officially out of bankruptcy court at the earliest.
I want to talk really quick, because you said, Governor Snyder could step in here and make his thoughts known on this. Do you think that would be dangerous for him politically at this point in the election, for him to step in and make his thoughts known?
What would be dangerous for him politically at this point would be to allow chaos in any form to return to Detroit before the election. He gets high marks in terms of his job approval for the way he's managed this Detroit situation. That probably won't get him many votes in Detroit, but he was not going to get many votes in Detroit anyway. His worry is not Detroit voters. It's how he's perceived as a manager outside the city. He's invested a lot of state funds and a lot of his own political capital in this. If he lets it go to heck now, just short of the election, I think he pays a price for that.
What do you think? Last word on this.
Yeah, I think the governor's got to be careful that this was a huge investment, and it is something that he did that most people think was the right thing. You don't want it to collapse now by changing up at the critical hour in bankruptcy court. So.